Lori and Chad were very cavalier in their affair and relationship. While they hid it from their spouses, it seems lots of other people witnessed their twisted romance. Prosecutors allege it was their desire for sex with each other that was the driving force behind their conspiracy to murder Lori's children, JJ and Tylee, and Chad's wife, Tammy. So what exactly did their friends and family witness? What did they think of this relationship? And what did they make of their doomsday beliefs? Answers to those questions are now playing out in front of the jury as Lori faces charges for the 3 murders.
They came in and sat on the couch and was quite affectionate with each other.
You don't get married 4 weeks after you just buried your wife of almost 30 years. You just don't do that.
Tonight, we are live from Boise, Idaho, where the judge has banned cameras from the courtroom, but we are bringing you all the big moments with our correspondent, Chanley Painter, who has been inside the courtroom. And we are playing audio recordings of the most compelling testimony as our in-depth coverage of Idaho versus Lori Daybell, the Doomsday Cult Mom murder trial, continues. I'm Vinny Politan. Great to have you with us here on Closing Arguments. And it's really absolutely jaw-dropping and amazing when you hear some of the testimony during the trial of Lori Daybell as it pertains to this relationship with Chad. To me, this is an adulterous affair, okay? They happen all over the place, but they don't really usually happen in this manner. I mean, these two, when they first meet, are both married. He's married for more than 20 years. She's married for more than 10 years. Yeah, it was her 4th husband, but this was the longest of all her marriages. And they had children as well involved in these marriages. And they were just so out in the open about it around people. This is what we're learning during the trial, that they're really not hiding it. And if they are trying to hide it, they're not hiding it very well. It seems very clear to a lot of people that these two are going at it, even though when they met, they were both married. And of course, Lori's husband is murdered first, and then Tammy dies second. But the openness of this, the one image I can't get out of my mind, I'm gonna try to, but I can't yet, is these two and their little makeout session at BYU. This is Brigham Young University. I mean, they have a lot of rules that make the school a little more conservative than most around the nation. And I'm sure somewhere in those rules, there's probably something against making out at the track. And it's probably a little more egregious when you are married and making out at the track. Bizarre, right? Like you're doing this in public, in public view. So what does that tell us about these two? You know, there are affairs. People sneak around. I've covered that trial, you know, dozens and dozens of times. This one is different. And then, besides just being out in the open in front of people, then it becomes extremely transparent when Tammy dies, and then they have their little quickie wedding 17 days after she's in the grave, and Chad's got his hand on Lori's right buttock with his left hand with his malachite wedding ring for the wedding photo. I mean, it doesn't take long. It's just over 2 weeks. And he's married again? They don't understand. And somehow, some way in their minds, they think everyone's gonna think this is like normal, this is okay. Yeah, it happens all the time. Like this is no. And especially in light of the fact that in order for this union to happen and the way it happened, people died. People died. All right, I get it. Like you're not happy in your marriage, you get a divorce, maybe you were having an affair and then you quickly hook up with that other person, right? That's one thing, and I get it. It happens all the time. But when a whole bunch of people have died in order for this union to happen and to be so out in the open. And what are they thinking that other people are are going to say or think. And especially with dead people all around you, hey, maybe they might put 2 and 2 together. So friends and family of Lori and Chad have been speaking out about all this inside the courtroom. And tonight we're going to take a listen to that, to the friends and family, and get some analysis of what exactly these two were thinking and the reactions of those who are closest to Lori and Chad at the time that all this is happening. We're going to do that. But first, like we do every night, we're going to start with the 3 biggest moments from today during the trial. So we go out to Court TV legal correspondent Chanley Painter, who's joining us live from outside the courthouse in Boise, Idaho tonight. Chanley, great to see you. You know, every day brings us something different, something new, something that we haven't heard, despite the fact that you have been covering the story literally for years. Let's talk about number 1 for today out in Boise.
Vinny, I have been looking forward to talking to you about the testimony today all day long. Okay, huge testimony coming out of the courtroom from a former friend, Audrey Barattiero. Vinny, I was in the courtroom and it was firework after firework, so much so jurors barely lifted their heads because they were taking so many notes throughout her emotional testimonies. But first, who is Audrey? Well, she was a follower. She says, yes, a follower of Chad Daybell and Lori for about a year. They met in November 2018, and she testified that she traveled all over the United States, you know, for these religious teachings and conferences, and she was part of the mission to rid the world of zombies and prepare for the end times. And Chad had told her that in a prior life, she had been married to Jesus, and her name was Joanna. And she says, yes, I believed him. I thought I could trust him. And she said it sounded cool. It made her feel special and that she belonged in what really was clear in the courtroom as this cult following Chad and all these women following him in these teachings. But in late 2019, in October, she's in Rexburg. She's staying at Lori's home, and she said she had prayed and she felt as though she needed to dissolve the friendship with Lori. So she tells Lori, she kind of confronts her. I asked her, is there anything weird going on that I don't know about? And Lori's like, well, what do you mean? And she said no. So she said, I took her at her word, but I started to go up the stairs. I'm going to pack and leave. And that's when Lori threatened to kill her, Vinny. She claims that Lori had that really loud, kind of creepy laugh at her as she's trying to walk away, and then threatens to kill her. She said that Lori would cut her up and do something that cut her up, but she wasn't really in the mental space to cut someone up because there'd be lots of blood and lots of bleach, and that there would be trash bags involved, and that Lori would bury me where no one would ever find me. Now, Audrey in the courtroom is sobbing. She's breaking down. She takes these long pauses to repeat this threat that Lori allegedly gave her. Lori, on the other hand, is at defense counsel table, laughing, her eyebrows raising, rolling her head back, you know, laughing at what is happening, and then nodding like disagreeing, leaning over to chat with her attorney, John Thomas, as though this was not only unexpected, but just wholly incredulous. But on cross-examination, here's what happens, Vinny. The defense gets up there. Jim Archibald, her lead attorney, the most passion I've ever seen from him on a cross-examination happened with Audrey during this moment. And Lori's kind of leaning in as he raises his voice and says, Audrey, do you remember in your testimony in the grand jury hearing where you didn't say anything like this? And she says, well, I was scared. She said she'd chop me up and that she would come and find me in the dark of night. And then Jim Archibald goes, so you want this jury to believe that you didn't make all this crap up? And she goes, no, I was scared. And that's how that ended. And boy, what a moment.
Yeah. This, again, unexpected. This is really the first of this inner circle that, and I think it helps her credibility in that she's admitting that she was a follower and that she believed and she was doing all these things. Everyone else is trying to distance themselves from those beliefs that has testified, has always sort of Melanie Gibb and others, all sort of like, well, you know, she sounds like she told the jury that she was all in, and she's admitting that to this jury.
Yes, she admitted that freely. And like you said, the first witness, Melanie, said she would have some hesitations. Zulema said she never received confirmation from the spirit, but she would just kind of participate and go along with things. Audrey says she believed it, and she communicated with Chad about his prior lives, believed that he was Methuselah and that he was James the Less at one time. And there was one great moment on cross-examination with Jim Archibald where he says, you believed him, yes. Did you not think it was weird that he was always someone great in a past life? He wasn't some loser from the 1700s? She was like, no, yeah, I guess you're right. He was always someone significant in those past lives, Benny.
Well, so Lori's reaction, significant, right? The jury can see, if Lori's laughing during this, the jury, if they lift their heads up from the notes, they can see all that, right?
Absolutely. In fact, today, she reacted a lot during Zulema's testimony, Melanie, but today was a different level. She was not holding back, and it would vacillate from the very serious, kind of leaning in, like, what are you going to say now, Audrey? And then to like this, she would be like, and she would roll her eyes. She laughed several times during the testimony, shifted around, took a drink of water, whispered to her attorneys. Her whole body language and demeanor was saying, you're lying, Audrey, and I know the truth.
Well, this is so important, the credibility of this witness for this jury, whether or not they believe her. Because this is a direct threat, right? Lori is threatening to kill her, to cut her into pieces, much like her daughter was cut into pieces in this case. So it's not such a leap now, all of a sudden, the connections between Lori and the death of Tylee, if the jury believes the testimony of Audrey Barattiero. Because she said she threatened to do to me what this jury knows was done to Tylee. Oh,
yeah. Very similar, like the chopping up, and then her saying blood would be everywhere. It was so much work to chop someone up. There would have to be all this bleach involved. And then she mentioned trash bags. We know J.J. Vallow was wrapped in layer after layer of trash bag, Vinny, and then buried where no one could find you, Of course, they were luckily found in Chad Daybell's backyard. But, of course, that's going off in everyone's head as she's telling this testimony and putting the pieces together.
Wow. I mean, we've been covering this story, but because such little information has come out pre-trial, a lot of stuff we're learning here we've never heard before. All right. How about her testimony about these castings? We've heard so much about the castings. What did Audrey have to say about that?
Yes. This was another fascinating part of her testimony. She first talks about castings with Charles and then Tammy. So let's start with Charles, because this is the summer of 2019. She says suddenly Lori wants to talk about zombies and people being possessed. She hadn't heard that before, really didn't think there was a basis for that, but Lori wanted to work on her husband, these castings. So they joined hands Audrey's thinking this is a prayer. And then Lori said she was going to get the spirit out of Charles. And then each woman was to say things like knives, fire, weapons. And then they would try to use those verbally. And she said then when it got around to her part in the circle, that she didn't feel comfortable, so she didn't say anything. And it was in this moment, Vinny, where Lori's face, she laughs. She's like, she kind of raises her eyebrows like, you didn't say anything, girl, you said something. And she starts laughing and like, I can't believe this kind of emotion from her at defense counsel table. Jurors sit directly across from Lori. They can see all of this. And so she goes on, and when it came time for this casting for Tammy, October 9th, 2019, I know you know that date, Vinny, they're in Missouri, and they go to hold hands. Melanie Pawlowski is there, and she says that Lori said Tammy had a spirit and needed to be taken out. I told Lori I did not want to help or participate. And then Audrey has this really long pause, and she begins to sob. It goes, she pressured me. She said, you're supposed to be my friend. You're supposed to help me. And so she said she just did a simple little prayer to the Heavenly Father, and Lori is laughing and nodding and disagreeing again at Audrey at counsel table at this moment. basically saying, no, she did participate from her body language. And then she goes on to talk about how Lori explained Tammy's spirit was in a cage or jail and she needed to be set free. But then she talks about she heard Chad say something to the effect of, why is the body still alive? Or something like that. Audrey said, I realized that they must have taken things further. They didn't intend for the person to be helped. They didn't want the person to live. You could hear a pin drop in the courtroom when she said that. It's finally the first witness who participated in these castings, Vinny, who says Lori and Chad literally did not want the person possessed to live any longer.
And in a conspiracy case, this is so important relative to Tammy. In this part, as we're listening to this, and you're describing Lori's reactions, there's another part of that is not going to be helpful for Lori Daybell, because my guess is at the end of the day, her attorneys are going to argue that Chad was off the ranch and Alex was off the ranch and she was manipulated and she didn't know what was going on. She is demonstrating through her reactions that she remembers everything and she knows exactly what's going on. Exactly what's going on. Bad news for her. She doesn't know that. All right, what do you have for number 3? Big day.
So number 3, Ian Pawlowski, the nephew-in-law of Vallow Daybell. We were expecting Melanie. Ian was called first this afternoon, Vinny, and he is integral because he has some interesting things to say about his Aunt Lori. So he married Melanie after knowing her for only 10 days, is what his testimony was. And he asked Chad and Lori for permission for Melanie's hand, because that's how important Chad and Lori were to Melanie's life. And the morning after the wedding, all of a sudden Melanie just unloads on him everything, shares everything that she has been worried about this whole time. And so the next morning he got up, his daughter, because they were there for the wedding, was gone. And he was just frantic, they had done something to his daughter. And then he found her a little while later, hiding behind a curtain, I believe it was his testimony. But then less than a week later, he's in fear now. He's in fear for himself, his family, after everything Melanie has confided in him, that he goes to the police in Rexburg and cooperates and makes some recordings of Chad, Lori, Melanie. And so tomorrow, Vinny, we will find out if the judge will allow the jury to hear some of those recordings, because the defense on Ian's cross wants to use them. So they may be hearing some of that in the morning, and then we expect to hear from his wife, Melanie. Again, another huge witness for prosecutors here.
Yeah, those recordings, obviously extremely fascinating and revealing. But to hear from Melanie, Lori's niece, the one who sort of followed him around, and her mother passed away, right? That's the sister of Lori's that passed away, the mother of Melanie?
Right. Right, so Melanie looked to Lori as a mother figure. They were very close, and even talks about that on the stand, how loving and supportive that relationship was with Melanie. I mean, Melanie moved to Rexburg with her Uncle Alex and Lori, along with Tylee and JJ, and lived in a different apartment there at that same complex, so very close relationship. And
I can understand if her testimony is this way, and it seems that her husband Ian was that way, that she might be a little bit scared because everybody else is dying, including 2 of Lori's children. Okay, wow. And her ex-husband. And her ex-husband. There was an attempt on his life. All right, Chanley, that was a lot. That was a lot. Okay, we will speak again next hour. Chanley Painter in Boise tonight. When we come back, we're going to talk about those friends and family of Lori and Chad. What did they see? What did they observe? What does it mean? We'll get some insight from our guests, plus coming up next hour.
When JJ and Tylee were missing, Lori seemed to have absolutely no concern about her children, while everyone else was very concerned. What does this prove to the jury?
Yeah, and guess what? They know. They know exactly what happened. And they love me, and we're still together forever. They love me, and they are fine, and they do know the truth, and I know the truth.
mystery that's captivated the nation.
This stretches just so beyond what anyone could imagine.
And left a trail of dead bodies.
Audrey Vallow Daybell,
accused of triple murder, including her 2 youngest children.
You'll hear every dramatic moment.
Money, power, and sex. That's what this case is about.
Just tell the truth. It's that simple.
The Doomsday Cult Mom Murder Trial. Coverage continues weekday mornings only on Court TV.
Because of her manipulation and deception, she would find somebody that could manipulate, like he was manipulating, deceiving too. He tricked her, she tricked him. They tricked each other so well that they were their equal opposite evil match for each other. Right. Like they got exactly what they put out. You know, what you put out comes back to you. I think that's what they did for each other.
That's Melanie Gibb. That was Audrey Daybell's friend, giving some insight, calling her and Chad evil. So this is what I'm calling Houdini time, as we're talking about some of the friends, you know. Did Chad and Audrey really have them? This inner circle of people? What did they think about this twisted romance that they were observing? Let's take a listen, because the jury is hearing a lot of information from people who were followers, people who were friends and neighbors of Chad and Audrey inside that courtroom. Let's take a listen.
Did Audrey ever indicate to you whether or not she and Chad were engaged in an affair?
She would just share that they were intimate.
Was this while Charles was still alive?
Yes.
Was this while Tammy was still alive?
Yes.
Did Audrey indicate whether or not she thought it was okay that they were engaging in intimate relations?
She did. She felt it was according to God's will.
And did she tell you, ever expand on why she believed it was according to God's will?
Yes. She explained that because they had been married in multiple lives and they had a mission together, that it was okay.
To me, it seemed like they were acting like a couple of teenagers that were first in love. And they were holding hands and sitting real close to each other. And Chad was rubbing her leg. And I just thought that was odd for your spouse just passed within a week and a half.
They were really loving with one another and affectionate.
Now, at this time, were you aware that he was still married to Tammy Daybell?
Yes.
Okay. Did the fact that he was married come up at all?
Yes.
All right. How did that happen?
I asked him about I just asked him how his marriage was with the Tammy and if she was a good wife, and he said he had no complaints, that she was a good wife, but he said her time was coming up, and that him and Lori were gonna go do the things that they had committed to do for God.
It was my understanding that her belief system had changed because of this group that she had recently become a part of.
He was trying to teach me about some of their beliefs. About the gathering of the 144,000 and then Satan having powers to push people out of their bodies, and then the spirits being stuck.
Audrey and Chad were teaching that if you had been exalted in another world, another probation, then this time that you came to the earth, it didn't count for you because you had already proven yourself in another probation. And she would often say, it doesn't count for me.
Do you recall who else you were told was dark?
So it was Charles, it was Brandon, her brother, not Alex, but another brother of hers, eventually her dad, and then Tylee, then Kay, then at the very end, JJ.
It's amazing, you know? It's God's plan for us to have this adulterous affair. How convenient. All right, let me bring in my guests. In New York City, senior reporter for the U.S. Sun, Luke Kenton, back with us. And in Los Angeles, California, body language expert, forensic psychiatrist, trial expert, witness, and columnist, Dr. Carol Lieberman. Great to see you both. Luke, it's amazing what is taking place inside this courtroom as we're hearing how cavalier these two were about this affair.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, certainly unashamed with what was going on for months before they officially got together. I think what's really interesting about the testimony that we've heard so far is that so much of it from friends and other people who are in this circle with them that partook in this kind of fringe religious group, whatever you want to call it. Some of them say now, at least in hindsight, that they didn't necessarily believe it, they were just going along with it. But, you know, Lori and Chad were both convincing in what they were saying. But the degree to which Lori and Chad believed what they were saying, I think, is still up for debate. But it seems to be that they really took this rhetoric or scripture or whatever they called it to their advantage, to justify their whims and their wants. And anybody that kind of questioned them or stood in their way, they were deemed a dark spirit and an enemy of their progress. Yeah,
and to justify getting their loins back together. Dr. Carol Lieberman, should I be surprised that these two, I mean, their affairs happen all the time, right? Usually people are sneaking around a little bit. They were sneaking around behind the backs of their spouses, but like everybody else saw what was going on here.
Well, yes, because they felt that they were entitled. I mean, after all, they were the god and goddess of the 144,000. And so why shouldn't people go along with what they're doing now? You know, it's really hard because in talking about things that are religious beliefs, I mean, it's hard for anybody to prove one thing or the other. It's just what you believe. So, and they made sure that they made everybody else feel special. You know, so like that this person was somebody else married to Jesus and so on in a previous life. And so if you question what Lori and Chad are saying in terms of their relationship and their mission, then that would mean that maybe the things that they told you about you, you know, would not be true either, and you're not that special.
Luke, I want to take a listen to this great interview that you did. This is from the U.S. Sun with Cresha Easton, who is little JJ's aunt and biological aunt. Really insightful into Audrey Barattiero. Let's listen.
She's different. She was warm and loving and funny, very just funny. It's kind of like, you know, you wouldn't imagine someone as she's pretty. She was pretty, and her personality matched it. That's rare, you know. But then, you know, you look back and you're like, well, there's Joseph Ryan, you know, Tylee's dad, and then all these things that just come out of the closet, and you're like, oh my God, you know, Satan was in my family. Not a good one either. She's the zombie. Her and Chad are the zombies, for real. If you just, and I'm gonna start there and I'll work my way back. It's usually how I roll. But they're the zombies. They're carcass. They're not there anymore. They're gone. I didn't know Chad before, but I mean, I don't think there was he didn't really seem to have too much there. That's not up to me to decide, you know. I don't see that there's no charisma.
Luke, that's interesting in the way she describes Lori, and we've heard this before, that, you know, when Charles meets her and she becomes part of that family and adopts JJ, like, people love her. They believe she's so likable.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, she was a former pageant queen as well, and in the extended version of that interview, you know, Cresha talks about how when Lori would walk into a room, she'd suck all the oxygen out of it and all the attention would go on to her. But walking into that courtroom a couple of weeks ago when the trial started, she said she didn't even recognize the woman that was sat in the dock anymore. She doesn't see the warmth. She doesn't really see any light behind her eyes anymore. And she said, you know, it's almost sad to see somebody that was once so full of life kind of hollow now and numb. And she shared a very prolonged stare-off, she characterised it as, with Lori on the second day of the trial, in between the graphic testimony that we heard about how Tylee and JJ's bodies were found. And she said, again, you know, she was looking her into the eyes and just didn't at all recognise that person that was married to her uncle for 13 years.
Unbelievable. All right, our guests are staying with us as our Friends and Family segment continues. When we come back, we'll hear from some of the family members. What did they think, again, of this twisted romance?
It's a mystery that's captivated the nation.
This stretch is just so beyond what anyone could imagine.
And left a trail of dead bodies.
Lori Vallow Daybell,
accused of triple murder, including her 2 youngest children.
You'll hear every dramatic moment.
Money, power, and sex. That's what this case is about.
Just tell the truth. It's that simple.
The Doomsday Cult Mom Murder Trial. Coverage continues weekday mornings only on Court TV.
Nobody knows what I've been through. My children, that I love more than anything. Lori, you were dancing on a beach with a smile on your face, taking wedding photos, trying to go on with life. You don't think trying to find some kind of happiness. You think I want to be alone? Do you think that your mother and your sister and your son don't deserve to know that the children are gone?
That's Lori's sister. Not so happy with Lori's new wedding and dancing on the beach while the children are gone. Not really thinking it's normal what she has done. And I want you to take a listen. We've got more family members who have spoken out about this relationship and what they thought about Chad and Lori. It's a romance that began when they were both married, but it's all underneath this cloud of this cult, of this religion, and like we were meant to be together, we were together in other lives. It's sick, sick stuff. And it would be okay if all these people weren't dead. Let's take a listen.
I feel like that's very quick, even for somebody who's grieving. And like, you don't get married 4 weeks after you just buried your wife of almost 30 years.
After my shooting, I started to have my beliefs about who I thought did it, and I got concerned about the situation. And so I started thinking back to previous stuff that had happened. And I remembered that in these groups, there were people who I didn't know, but I remember there was a bunch of emails Charles had sent me. So I went through and reread those. I remember distinctly inside of these groups, there was emails that were being sent with a group of them. And so I just went back to look at the emails Charles had sent me from there. And most of them came from a Chad Daybell. And since I didn't know who he was, I started Googling his name. I saw on an obituary for a Tammy Daybell. As things progressed and I came to my opinion about who it was that shot at me, I started to try to be proactive and hoping to get information, doing whatever I could. And in that process, we found out that no one had seen from Tylee or JJ.
When we went in January of 2020, the media had learned of the story of the kids missing, and we reached out. Every media outlet was all over this, and we talked to every outlet we could. We appeared on talk shows. We did everything we could to raise awareness for the kids missing.
Around this time, did you ever become aware if Lori Vallow had remarried?
I did, yes.
Do you know who she had married?
Yes.
Who was that?
Chad Daybell.
Were you ever informed that JJ and Tylee were found?
Yes.
When was that?
June 9th, 2020.
Do you know where they were located?
Yes.
Where were they located?
in Chad Daybell's backyard, buried in shallow graves.
And at that time, December of 2019, were you in contact with your sister?
No,
Were you aware of where she was located at that time?
no.
Did you know where Lori Vallow was on November 27th?
No.
Were you aware if she had moved from the Phoenix area?
Yes.
Okay. Did she ever tell you where she moved to?
No.
Did you have a conversation with her about where she had moved to?
No.
Okay. Did you ever ask her where she was?
Yes.
How did she respond?
When she initially moved, she just told me she was moving somewhere cold and that it was dangerous for her to tell anybody where she was going.
Okay. You said you spoke with her on the night of November 27th, 2019, the day before Thanksgiving. Did you try to contact her on Thanksgiving?
Yes.
What happened?
Her phone was disconnected.
Okay. Were you able to contact her after that?
No.
Let's bring back in our guests, Luke Kenton from the U.S. Sun, senior reporter, Carol Lieberman, a board-certified forensic psychiatrist. Dr. Carol Lieberman, let me ask you, two different scenarios taking place here. It seems this inner circle of friends knew everything about Chad and Lori, yet the families knew nothing. Why is that?
Yes. Well, for one thing, you know, Chad and Lori were around the friends more. They were trying really to keep, other than their great romance, and Freud, of course, said long ago that sex is a very powerful, the most powerful emotion, or the most powerful agitator in terms of making people do things. They were like moths to a flame. So they were trying not to, there was no reason to tell her family. She was trying to hide that from them. One of the things I also want to mention is that for the jury, all of these witnesses, the friends and the family, they are so credible. You know, the jury will have to ask themselves, why would these people lie about these things? They have it doesn't benefit them in any way to come here and testify and talk about all these things, and it's so credible. You know, I think part of her didn't want her family to know.
That's a great point you make about the jury. These folks had no reason to lie about this stuff. No reason. Luke, I want to play another piece of that exclusive interview that you got for the U.S. Sun with Cresha Easton. Again, this is little JJ's aunt here talking about a moment inside the courtroom during the trial.
Nothing was said. Nothing was spoken. It was just this gaze. We both just gazed at each other, locked eyes for an awkward amount of time. And then, anyway, so it didn't mean anything really at that time. We parked nicely. And then we got into the courtroom just in time for Archibald, the defense attorney, to stand up and basically say his client did not want to be there the rest of the day. And we were like, what? And I'm thinking, if we have to be here, you have to be here. It's time. The time is now, Lori, to face and be accountable. And Judge Boyce ruled that she had to stay. Me and Mom darted out. And then I started to think about that stare off. And I was like, oh my God, you know, like I like to think that maybe she saw something in me and it spooked her.
Luke, this is fascinating, getting more details about what happened the day that Lori wanted to get out of the courtroom. A stare down with JJ's aunt, which is Kay's daughter.
Yeah, and it, like she said in that clip, you know, it was an uncomfortable amount of time with no real emotion showed from Lori and none returned from Cresha either. They just stood there staring at each other for the first time in what must have been, you know, a few years. And it came to a natural conclusion eventually, but like she said, you know, she hopes that maybe she saw something in Cresha, maybe saw how hurt she was and just didn't want to be in the courtroom, didn't want to face what she's allegedly bit done. And later on that afternoon, they showed images of Tylee and JJ's remains, which was obviously a very difficult thing for the family to see, and I'm sure it was difficult for Lori as well.
Dr. Carol Lieberman, what are your thoughts about that stare-down moment between JJ's aunt, Kay's daughter, and Lori inside the courtroom? And then, is it a coincidence, do you think, that day that she didn't want to be in there? Or do you think it maybe it played a role?
Yes, it was too real for her. It's really interesting, these different emotions that Lori is showing or not showing. And you have to wonder, is part of it really just a real reaction, to an authentic reaction to what the various witnesses are saying? Is it her craziness, whatever underlying psychiatric problem she has, is that rearing its head as the trial is moving on and she's realizing it's looking worse and worse for her? Is it performance? Is she purposely making these kinds of grimaces or expressions and so on for the jury, to try to somehow make it better for her, make them like her better, or make them think that she's innocent? It's you kind of wish you were in there and watching this in real time, watching her in real time.
Yeah, this case, so many twists and Luke, we're learning a lot of things here, and I know you and the U.S. Sun has been covering the story in depth, but we're learning a lot of things at trial that we didn't know before.
Yeah, I mean, actually, before this trial took place, I spoke to Kay Woodcock, who's JJ's grandma, and she said to me, what we know now is just the tip of the iceberg, and we're seeing that in real time. We're seeing all this information come to light that we previously didn't know. I think the smoking gun so far has been the hair that was found on the tape that was bound around JJ's body, which belonged to Lori. I mean, that's a huge piece of evidence that Larry Woodcock spoke outside the courtroom the other day, and he said, this ties it all together for me now. There's been so much circumstantial evidence in this case, but this is a physical piece of evidence that ties Lori to the crime scene, and also suggests that perhaps she played more of a role in either the act of murdering JJ or the act of disposing of his body.
Absolutely, I agree 1,000%. Luke Kenton, senior reporter, U.S. Sun, thank you. Dr. Carol Lieberman, always great to have you sharing your insight with us.